Suppose what I'd love to talk about today would be alchemy, and um, I suppose the more I've researched it, I find alchemy like maybe the most complex topic that I've ever kind of come across, because maybe part of its nature historically, because it's quite deliberately obscure, um, and um, I've been trying to understand it and understand its relationship to psychological development. A lot following Jung, really. A lot of yeah, and so I've come to kind of understand some of the key phases of alchemy, and I wondered if we could talk through
Yeah,
some of the phases. Um,
that's fine. But in fact, I mean, I've understood even more probably since I did those talks, and it's a very, I mean, it is the life process itself. Life itself is the alchemical transformation of all of us. You know, we come into life, we grow up, we do all the things we do, and then we pass on to another world, and then we come back again. And so it's a sort of circular process going on continually. And each time we come back, we understand more, we learn more if we want to. And that's all the time we're being transformed or transfigured, if you like, by life itself. So life is the great alchemist.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. See, I've been. I recently was in Florence, and I've been understanding more about the Renaissance and what was happening there with Marsilio Ficino and the Medici, and that's my understanding as well. Is this notion of the prime theology, or the ancient theology, of which all traditions are. It's the quintessence of all religious traditions. Um, yeah, so I suppose this way of approaching it, I'm reading The Master and as Emissary by Ian McGilchrist at the moment, and he's talking about the hemispheres. I suppose this way of approaching it might be a bit of a left brain approach, but I suppose you could break down alchemy into what they call the Negredo, the Albedo, and the Rubedo.
Yes, and another one called the Citronatus, Citronatus or something. There's a yellowing stage before the Rubedo, which I didn't put into my talks.
Okay. So Anne, what's your understanding? We could start in Negredo. What's your understanding of what that means to the alchemists, and also what that might mean to us psychologically and inwardly?
Well, inwardly, as I put in my book, have you read my book or not yet?
Not yet. I would absolutely love to.
Okay, well, wait a bit, because there's a new edition coming out at the end of November, and it will be a revised edition. So wait till December before you get it.
Okay.
Anyway, in that I describe that the Negredo is really the state that the whole of humanity is in. It's a state of unconsciousness, a state of not knowing, of ignorance, not of sin. Sin does not come into it. That's a Christian thing. That doesn't enter into alchemy. But it's the state we're all in before we begin to become aware of what we are and who we are and what we're supposed to be doing on the planet. So it's a state of most of humanity, and it is a state of darkness. And they compared it to the dark of the moon, really, or night, when you can't see anything clearly. And the raven was its symbol, because it was a black bird. And they saw it, I think, in their retorts, their alchemical retorts, they saw it as what they called the massa confusa, sort of primary stage, before the elements begin to be differentiated out. And in relation to the, say, an analysis with a Jungian, it would be the stage where the person comes in and doesn't know what to say or what to ask or what to do, and just has to wait until they can understand that there are two parts of themselves, the conscious and the unconscious. Before that, everything was one. They didn't know they had an unconscious. They didn't know they had a conscious.
Yeah.
They just were who they were, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the state you're in when you come into analysis. And then gradually you understand that there are two parts of yourself, and that one part has to learn to listen to the other and communicate with the other. And what Jung called, very important phrase, listen to the spirit of the depths. And they might come into analysis having no idea of that there is such a thing as the spirit of the depths.
Yeah.
And so that this is an alchemical process of expanding one's understanding. Or say if one is a left brain person with the McGilchrist understanding, it would be opening to the presence of the right hemisphere and bringing them both into a better balance. You can see them, the left as masculine and the right as feminine. I don't think he says that in his book, but this is helpful, I think, because the right hemisphere connects us to the depths, whereas the left hemisphere tends to connect us to this world. It's more what Jung called the spirit of the times.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely distinction, that spirit of the times and the spirit of the depths. And the conscious mind doesn't know anything about the spirit of the depths to begin with. And then gradually it becomes aware that there is something else, something that can teach them, something that may give them dreams or visionary experiences even. So it opens its consciousness to this much wider panorama of what life is about.
Yes. So Jung mentions the spirit of the times and the depths in the Red Book, and I wonder if we could talk a little about the image of Saturn, because I recently went to Florence and there was an amazing fresco within the dome, and at the bottom of the fresco was the winged figure of Kronos, the Greek deity of time, and to his right was a skeleton with a scythe, and my understanding of the Nigredo and of this consciousness where we are trapped essentially, or feel trapped at least within the spirit of the times. I'm kind of intuiting a relationship to this image of Saturn, this image of time, as almost the ruler of that sleep, or that state of unconsciousness.
I think that's correct. I would say I would agree with you there. Definitely.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, and so so one finds oneself trapped in a materialistic or a materialistic state of consciousness. I think Mircea Eliade described it as profane space and time, is how I understand it. A place of disorientation, a place of feeling lost and rootless. And then do you feel that it's kind of part of the natural impulse? I mean, I'm going all over the place a bit, but I know for me, a lot of this questioning started in a kind of wound, or a kind of I felt myself deeply within this place, this Saturnine led consciousness. I've really been there, and it was I suppose that was the impulse, or the birthplace for my kind of seeking into the door to the right hemisphere, you could say, or this more imaginative way of being. So I'm wondering, is this a natural process? Is there do we need to seek it, kind of like seek a way out?
It's not something that we need to do. It's something that comes naturally if we listen, really. And if one is in a dark place, say in a depression or something like that, there seems to be no way out of the depression. But we have little hints of things that are sent to us if it's our time to wake up, really. It's all to do with people, where they are in their lives, what experiences have happened to them, whether they feel discontented with their lives and with who they are, whether they feel they want to look for something else. It really depends on the individual, because you can't impose it as a construction on the whole of humanity. Because although it's happening now, because we're being pushed to the wall, if you like, at the moment, humanity. We have to change.
Mhm.
But it doesn't happen in the past. It hasn't happened normally that way. It's happened as you described it, that you come to a place where you feel there's no way out, and you wonder where the help might be to get you out, and then something comes and you have an idea and you follow a instinct, or you pick up a
Mhm.
book, falls out of a shelf, or something happens. And then you go on from there, and your path unfolds as you search. And I mean, my path now, I'm in my late 80s, it's taken me a long time to get to this understanding that I have now. But I certainly didn't have it in my 20s and 30s. I had the idea of the quest,
Mhm.
wanting something, but I didn't have any much discoveries.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it happens in each person's life in a different way, and it can't be forced or programmed or imposed as a sort of construct or as a theory even. It
Mhm.
has to just, each person has to discover it. It's like Plato's thing of the cave, that we're in the cave and we only see the shadows, and we have
Mhm.
to find our way out of the cave so that we can see the things that are creating the shadows on the walls of the cave,
Mhm.
which is a lovely metaphor, I think. So
Yeah.
ask me any other questions, just go on asking, Steve.
Yeah. So yeah, I suppose we'll stick on the Negredo for a little bit. I suppose the value, if we were to kind of share this content with people, and I know for me, if a few years ago when I was kind of in that place, the value of this image of the Negredo as a archetypal pattern, or as yeah, an archetypal pattern, I feel like that can really help people in that place because of the kind of validation of their suffering, or the validation of this as an, as you said, a natural phase and a natural part of life. And so yeah, I think that's a really significant thing to highlight, really, because I know when you're feeling lost and you're feeling like you're searching in books or places or different places you go to try and find the answers, and it is of no avail, and you're feeling kind of trapped. I think the understanding that that it is a part of the process, and as you said, kind of like the essential process of life, um, can be very empowering. And so yeah, and then I'm a bit where to go with it. So what's your understanding of the next sort of phase then? Because I suppose there's a Gnostic myth which I read in Edwin Edinger's Ego, the Ego and Archetype. Is a Jungian student, and he talks about a Gnostic myth, and the myth is that that there was a soul in the kingdom of heaven, essentially, which descended on a journey, was sent on a journey to find a pearl, and becomes kind of lost in the realm of matter, and forgets.
That's the hymn of the pearl, isn't it?
That's it, yeah.
Yes.
And so I suppose I wanted to mention that because it's an interesting kind of way of understanding, because it almost implies, or seems to imply, that the Negredo is a kind of forgetting. And again, you've mentioned Plato, who, as I understand it, thought of knowledge as a remembering. So when I'd love to ask you about the albedo and the imagination, and what the significance of that is, because suppose my feeling is that as a child, when I was younger, it felt like the imagination was free, and certain meaning was everywhere, and I was living in the dream, and it's almost as though a fall happens along the way. Maybe the left brain becomes dominant, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but
What happens is that the child has to adapt to the culture, and the culture is missing this depth and insight. So the child loses its imaginative faculty and thinks, well, I've got to learn these things at school. I've got to do what my parents are telling me. I've got to obey the teachers, and I've got to fit into the world. And so it forgets that, I mean, in a lovely Wordsworth poem that I can't remember it, but we come with all this great gifts, really, but then we lose them. We forget, and we just adapt ourselves to the culture and the culture's norms, and earning your living and getting qualifications, finding a wife, having children, etc. And so you get swept into the stream of the spirit of the times. And because nobody's told you about the other thing and you haven't been able to hang on to it, it's gone. And so you have to find your way back to it. And the albedo is really about the dawning of awareness, which is such a beautiful phrase, I think. And it's really, the alchemists compared it to the moonlight, to the whiteness of moonlight, illuminating the darkness of the night sky. So illuminating the darkness of the Nigredo. And they compared it to also the dawn, the coming of the dawn, the whitening, first the whitening. And the rubedo is the later stage of the reddening. But first of all, there's the very early stage, 4 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock, when the light is just beginning to get lighter.
Yes.
There's no sun yet. And it's I'll just tell you a dream of mine, which is in that book. I'll tell it very quickly. Before I went to my first interview with Gerhard Adler to see whether I could be taken on as an analyst, I had this dream, and I dreamt that I went on a journey to the moon in a rocket, and I landed there, and on the surface of the moon was this enormous iron structure like the Eiffel Tower, and the whole of the moon's surface was dead. There was no living thing, no animal, no bird, no life, no plant, nothing. And there was just that, and me, just this iron structure and me. Then I found myself on a train, and then in the end I got dumped into a swimming pool. So water is associated with the albedo, the water of the unconscious, being dipped into it and immersed in it, so to speak. So that was my first immersion. And Gerhard Adler, I didn't have a clue what the meaning of that dream was, but he said he thought that as the moon was a symbol of the feminine, and always had been, the dream was saying, this is the state of the feminine within your own psyche and within the world. And this Eiffel Tower is the construction that has been put on reality by the left brain, basically, and by what we've done to nature, imposing our will on nature. So it was a very profound dream with many sort of ramifications. But that was an albedo dream. It was showing me the state of my psyche and what I'd tried to adapt to, but couldn't. And then it was showing me that I had to reconnect with the water and with the feminine. And after that, then the analysis began properly, and I was taken on, not to be an analyst yet, but to be having a new stage of analytical work. So it's a lovely image, really, of entering the water of the unconscious and of clarification. Oh, saying, oh, I understand now. Oh, I didn't know there was an unconscious. Oh, I see, I must pay attention to my dreams.
Yes.
It's that sort of thing.
Yes, and the alchemists called the moon Luna, the feminine figure Luna, and something I thought of was the relationship between Luna and lunacy, and how, when I know for me the transition from that more left brain rational kind of structure, the structure you describe on the moon, the transition from that to the waters, to the more chaotic waters of the unconscious, was challenging, I suppose, and I think it does take quite an adjustment, growing up in a culture emphasizing the rational, emphasizing the logical, emphasizing the structured and the linear, emphasizing all of those values, and then to have a dream like this dream you mentioned on the moon, and it I feel it comes as so alien when we're less familiar to it, and it can be difficult to know what to make of it. So I suppose partly how I understand the phase of the albedo is a kind of chaotic phase in a way, as these images surface which have maybe long been unconscious.
Well, this is what happened to Jung, of course, when he was flooded by these images from the unconscious, when he was in 2013, when he started his descent into the underworld, so to speak. And it was overwhelming for him. I don't know why it was particularly overwhelming for him, because it doesn't happen to everybody like that. But certainly he had entering into the depths, so to speak, which were terrifying and confusing at first to him. And then he began to see a pattern, and he began to write down everything that he was experiencing. So it became less overwhelming and less frightening. But a lot of people would have described that as a schizophrenic episode. And occasionally people do have episodes like that, which unfortunately they're diagnosed as having schizophrenia and given pills for it, instead of waiting a few weeks and trying to see whether it's a genuine schizophrenic thing, or whether it's just a breakthrough to this thing that has been stuffed out of sight for so long. You know, so, which Jung uncovered. He took the lid off the pot, so to speak, and out came all these tremendous archetypal images, which, if he hadn't had a good education and he wasn't fairly secure in his ego as well, because that's important to have a strong ego to be able to deal with what comes up from the unconscious. And that's why one has an analyst to help one mediate, as it were, between the depths and between the rational consciousness.
Yeah. So a couple of kind of questions coming up here is, one would be, you mentioned that this transitional phase from when we're children to adapting to the culture, and you also mentioned that one needs to have quite a strong ego to integrate the images of the unconscious. I wonder, do you feel that it's again a necessary and natural phase or part of life to fall, so to speak, from that innocence of childhood into a more rigid, a more disciplined, a more more strict and severe kind of disciplining of consciousness into, say, the educational system? Because I feel there's a real tragedy in that we really lose that beautiful, innocent kind of space we're in childhood, and yet I feel like there's also value in that as well, in that we, as you kind of mentioned about Jung being educated enough and having enough kind of logic, I suppose, to kind of filter through some of the things and to make it a more coherent narrative for him. Yeah, so do you feel that that's a necessary or archetypal or important phase, or are there things that we could do to...
Well, I think that everything depends on the way we educate our children. At the moment, we don't educate them in the right way. We only educate the left brain. So the imagination after the primary school stage is shut down. We don't have nearly enough drama, poetry, acting, singing, playing a musical instrument, all of which would help the right brain to stay alive, as it were.
Yeah.
We close all that down in secondary school, and we just focus on the academic subjects, which are going to get us the GCSEs or whatever it is.
Yeah.
To go on to, I've got a grandson, so I've been through all this.
Yeah.
And he was dyslexic, so he didn't get anything at all. He got no GCSEs whatsoever. Yeah. So what is a child like that to do? He's excluded, you know, from the norm.
Mm-hmm.
But he's taken to farming, so he's okay for the moment. And he can relate to the land and the earth through his hands and through driving tractors and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But all the sort of poetic side of life has been shut out of his experience, and there's no way that I can get it back to him because it's too late now. So many children have to go through this educational process, and I think that's why there's so much violence in children towards each other, so much bullying,
Mm-hmm.
because they're unhappy and they don't know why, and so they attack other children and, you know, do whatever they do to try and pull down other children who may be doing well or might be happier or something.
Mm-hmm.
I remember with my grandson, there was a little boy who was sleeping in his room, and one night he stood over him and said, "I want to kill you." And so we made a big fuss and had a meeting with that boy and with my grandson and my daughter and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And we asked the boy, "Why did you say that?" And he said, "Well, I'm just so unhappy. I didn't know what to do." So that
Yeah.
was his way, you know, getting rid of his unhappiness was to take it out as aggression on another child. That's a very clear example, but this happens all the time in schools, and it happens with these dreadful knife crimes. People are just getting rid of their unhappiness, really,
Mm-hmm.
in stabbing somebody else to death. They think that that's some way of expressing their anger or their despair or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the future, I hope the educational system will change. It always says it needs more money, but money is energy, and the whole idea that money is fixed and immovable is wrong. It's part of the way we're taught to think about it. But it's flowing energy, and if you connect with that, the money will come. You know, there'll be more money available if our attitude changed. So that we ought to put certainly music back. Every child should play a musical instrument. Every child should go on with either some form of poetry or art or drama, something, you know?
Yes. Yes, definitely.
So I don't think it's right to close it down. I think it's happened and is happening and has happened for several hundred years because we've put the emphasis on the rational mind as being the supreme value.
Mm-hmm. And from what I'm understanding from what you're saying, the effort should be more to just emphasizing the lost values of the right hemisphere, or of that, the creative, intuitive and imaginative aspect of ourselves, and kind of bringing that more into the game alongside the left brain rational stuff.
It's really bringing in the heart. What does the child really enjoy doing? What makes it happy? What makes it feel really that life is worth living? That is the thing that needs to be followed, whatever it might be. To begin with, it might be making mud pies, but later on, it might be doing clay, you know, or clay pots or something. But it's following the heart. It's what Joseph Campbell called following your bliss. But first of all, you have to find your bliss before you can follow it. But it's easier to follow it if you've had it at school, if you had something that excited your interest, or a really good teacher, or something. Even one poem that you learnt by heart that you've remembered, you know?
Yes, that's definitely true. I suppose another kind of question about the albedo and this kind of phase of the work is that I know for me and for Jung, and there's this process of active imagination, of consciously invoking the images of the unconscious and dancing with those, and conversing and dialoguing with those. The sense I get is that not all of us need to do it that way, in terms of, like, you were mentioning music and poetry and art, and I'm really coming to understand that art really is an active imagination.
It is, absolutely, yes. My husband is an artist, and he's not a thinker at all. He's a visionary artist, and he waits for the vision to come, or the image to come, and then he will paint it. So that would be his active imagination, definitely. I keep getting these messages from somewhere, so don't pay any attention.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that that's absolutely true. That now I've lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay. I was just saying, I know for me, I know I'm a thinking type, and I know, like, I really like to read Jung, and that kind of pathway for me has really helped me connect to my feeling nature and connect to my heart. But I was just wondering, because I suppose you don't have to read Jung or even understand alchemy or understand any of these ideas.
Not if you're not a reader. Your way may be through dancing,
yes,
or through something else completely different. Because active imagination is really just paying attention to what attracts your interest. It's really following your heart in the truest sense. And the heart is actually physically connected to the right hemisphere of the brain. It's the first one to develop the right hemisphere out of the heart. So,
out of the heart.
Yes, yes, it's the first hemisphere. The left hemisphere comes later, a little bit later.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know.
I'll send you a picture of an embryo, and I think I've got one showing how it develops. Anyway, that's an interesting fact. But it's that side, it's the heart that has been shut down for now a few thousand years, really, ever since we had all the religious traditions which told us that we had to believe rather than to feel our way towards the divine. The way to the divine was to follow the instructions from the churches or the mosques or this or that, rather than to follow our hearts. And that is a big diversion, if you like. It's as if we've been diverted into a cul-de-sac and have lost the path to follow the heart. That's very, very important. And it's coming back now in all sorts of ways, and different teachers, particularly in America, are focusing on that.
Well, yeah, and I suppose we were talking about, you were mentioning education, and like I know for me, the internet, I think is, well, who knows what to make of the internet. It's a profound transformation in the transmission of information, and I know for me, I'm able, it feels like at least that I'm more able to follow my heart in terms of, if we define it as what captures my interest, because others who are following their heart are able to share that and to share the attitudes and the values that they embody and follow to following their heart, whether that's a musician or in business, or all of these different ways that people can individuate. And so I think that gives me hope, certainly, if I'm thinking of children going through education now. I think there's paradigms and there's guides or lights or kind of ways, like, oh, okay, this is what it is to follow one's heart.
Yeah. Well, it may be, but on the other hand, there's also the danger that they just follow a trend. They follow what social media tells them to follow, or what their friends are doing, and they lose track with their own essential self. And then if people speak against them or bully them, they go to pieces because there's nothing there. They haven't been given a structure, an ego structure, to hold their own in the face of what's happening in the world or what's coming at them. So that's a big danger of the internet. And the ego doesn't really get formed until you're up into your 20s or so. It's not formed when you're 6 or 8 or 10 or whatever, not even in your teenage years. So it needs help in order to be developed. And the educational system helps the ego by giving you qualifications and the sense of achievement, the sense that you've done what you were supposed to do, and you've got a ground in life from which to go, so to speak. You've got a platform from which to go on your path. So all that is good. And social media can be very, I mean, from the point of view of what we're doing now, it's absolutely amazing. And what you can discover on YouTube and all the things that interest you, that it's amazing. But it can be a distraction and even an addiction.
No, you're totally right, and you're completely right, and I feel that again hinges on this distinction you've made, which Jung mentioned in his Red Book, between the spirit of the times and the spirit of the depths. And
that's right.
You know, for me, the difference in the quality between me reading, you know, a philosopher or Jung, or even just dreaming and just going within, essentially, the difference in quality between that and then this kind of more extroverted thing of watching what other people are doing and the trends that are going on. I think that's a very significant thing. I suppose what comes to my mind now is that I've run about 7 seminars so far in London on talking about alchemy and talking about these ideas. And I suppose what I'm really trying to feel into and kind of think through is how to help kind of offer this kind of what you've mentioned to people, because it's I think it's absolutely maybe the most important thing to learn, is to buttress that kind of inner citadel of your soul, and to really understand that, what Jung called the spirit of the depths, to have that, to have that as a present reality that's integrated and there within yourself, and then meet the external world, and then one is less inclined to get swept up in ideologies and trends and ideas. And
that's right, because you have a solid sort of foundation, really. And this is particularly so now because we've lost the Christian structure in our society. It's no longer a Christian society in England anyway, or indeed in most of Europe. But there's nothing else that's replaced it. So what replaces it is the unconscious. And people then get sucked into leaders who say, follow me and I'll give you this, that, and the other. And another one says, I'll give you that, and everything will be wonderful. And they have no foundation with which to assess the value of what these people are saying, whichever side they're on, sort of thing. So they get sucked into ideologies. And this is what happened to Germany in the 1930s. It's what happened to communist China and Russia and the Soviet Union. And millions of people were killed because they were told that that group was the enemy and had to be wiped out and destroyed. In each particular case, they just wiped out millions of people without thinking that it was wrong at all. It was what they felt they had to do. And this is the danger of not having a good education. You need to know history a little bit. You need to know something about the psyche and how you can be taken over by the unconscious. And how rage, I mean, look at the awful things that people send out on their messages to people on the internet. You know, I want to kill you, I want to rape you, I want to, wipe you off the face of the earth. Where is that coming from? It's not coming from the ego, it's coming from the unconscious. And it's coming from disturbed people who have not integrated anything in their lives. They have no sense of who they are or what they're doing. All they can do is kind of explode in rage or attacks on other people, which shows how much anger there is in the unconscious, which is needing to be expressed, but not in that way. And it's because they haven't. I just not read you, but tell you something. There's a wonderful saying from Buddhists which said, if you bring forth what is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you may destroy you. And this is what's happening now. And you can see it in all the destructive sort of behavior that's going on, and self-destructive behavior, that they haven't brought forth the divinity that they are, because they don't know. Nobody's ever told them that divinity is within them, and that they need to develop, first of all, the ego, and then to connect with that inner self, that Jung called the self with a big S, which is the guiding, as it were, the guiding mentor of their life, really. If they knew that something existed in them, they would perhaps begin to listen to it, instead of rushing around following leaders outside, telling them what a Hitler or a Stalin or whatever outside, telling them what they have to do and that they have to follow the leader. It's absolutely fatal. And Jung absolutely was horrified by having Jungians, because he said, don't do it, don't start having teaching things and teaching people about individuation.
He was horrified by what, sorry?
Terrible trouble, which they have. The Jungians have got into terrible trouble because they think they know it all, which they don't. Jung was a great prophet and a great teacher, but not everybody can rise to that level. So, we have to keep certain humility, I think, with all this very powerful material. But certainly you can see now what happens when there's A, not enough ego, and B, too much swamping from the unconscious.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, this, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, because this is, I suppose it's where I find myself at the moment in my life, is that it's precisely as you said. It's, I think, for me, just, I think, astonished or in awe would be the words at some of the profundity of this material, these images, this whole inner world that's always been there and maybe have been unconscious of. And I'm definitely aware of this danger of inflation and becoming inflated by the material. At the same time, I think what we've just discussed, I think it's that line from the Gnostic Gospels you quoted about bringing forth what's within you. I suppose my orientation at the moment is just to serve in whatever way I can, and I think I'd love to. What's kind of on my mind is just helping people come to these understandings in whatever way that's possible, with humility. And I suppose, I suppose the question would be, what do you think the most effective way of communicating some of this stuff is?
Well, I think it's important that you have already done some good teaching, because I've listened to it. So you've got the structure there. You've got a nice audience, apparently, who's willing to listen to you. I think that you just have to structure it in the way that interests you, and don't give them too much at a time, and allow plenty of time for questions, because they will bring forth what you have constellated through what you're teaching them. They will be stimulated to ask the kind of questions which they want answers to. And so I think that you can have an interesting sharing of the bewilderment, the confusion, the wondering, the depression. What do we do? How do we find this way? You know, all of that can be covered in a meeting, which will be very helpful. And you don't have to worry about that you're doing the wrong thing, unless you get the sign of I'm the greatest. There's no teacher like me.
Yeah. Well, I think the images. I think maintaining that living kind of relationship to the anima or the unconscious. I think for me that is really what's called in Matthew like the narrow road unto life. I think that's.
Well, that sounds wonderful for you if you found that path and you're a good teacher, which I think you are, and you've got people who are coming to you to learn and to listen and to grow, because nothing is more important than explaining people to themselves, because there hasn't been anything to explain the psyche. Even now, this country is absolutely ignorant of the psyche. It's extraordinary, although there are thousands of psychotherapists working in England, but you'd never know it to look at the statements that come out, and even on the Grenfell Tower with that stupid remark by Rees-Mogg. I mean, there's no insight into the power of the word, and also the negative projections onto people. This is something you could bring up, because people may have emails attacking them or something, and you can explain to them where these are coming from. They're not real in relation to real situations. They're just people getting rid of their anger and their confusion. That sort of thing. So there's a lot that could come up in your teaching sessions, and you will just be guided as to what feels right for you. What is the feeling atmosphere in the room? Is it calm and engaged, or is the energy all over the place? Do you need to calm it down? You know, you have to just go by your instinct on how to handle each session and each situation, I think. And I'm quite sure that you're perfectly capable of doing that. And you can show my videos if you want on alchemy, or use them in any way you want.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Because the image is what people will remember. They won't remember so much the words, but they'll remember the images. And that speaks to the deep unconscious, whereas the words speak more to the rational mind.
And do you, an idea I had was to do, I suppose, with active imagination, do you feel that that, I don't know, for me it feels like very individual and inner kind of quiet work, active imagination, and I was wondering if there was a way to do that work with other people in a more kind of public.
Could, for instance, in a group, you could say, does anyone have a strong image that's come to them? And then you could say to the group, shall we follow that image and see
Mm.
where it leads us? But you can't have 20 people each bringing up their image because there wouldn't be time.
Yes.
And so I think you could always say, is this a good idea? Do you feel this is a good idea? Do you want to follow this? And
Mhm.
then you could say yes, and then you can see where it takes you, that image. It might take something that's relevant for the whole group.
Mhm.
But active imagination, not everybody can do it. Not everybody can have an image. Some may hear a word, some may hear a bit of music. It's
Mm.
different, you know. I would suggest you get one book called In the Dark Places of Wisdom. Have you got it?
I don't have that. I'm just going to note it down.
In the Dark Places of Wisdom
Yeah.
by Peter Kingsley.
Yeah.
And that will give you an insight into what real active imagination was in the time of the pre-Socratic Greeks of Parmenides in 600 BC. This was a practice that had been going on for millennia, probably in shamanic cultures. It's where people withdrew into a cave for 2 or 3 nights and just waited for the vision or the image or the dream to come to them.
Right.
And they didn't force it in any way. They probably went without food or perhaps with a bit of water during that time. But out of that came the connection with the deep divine world, if you like, and out of that came messages to bring back to the human community,
Mhm.
and also methods of healing. That's where they got their healing power from, was communicating
Ah.
with the visible dimension. So that is I want you to know what active imagination is in the deepest sense.
Mhm. So the pre-Socratics were connected to a shamanic
Yes,
tradition before that.
they were shamans. Yes, they were, definitely. And Peter Kingsley, totally brilliant Greek scholar. There's nobody in the world to reach his level of Greek scholarship. He's written several books, and his latest one is called Catafalque, and it's a tremendous criticism of the Jungians.
Okay. Yeah.
It's 400 pages of saying how stupid the Jungians are because they haven't understood Jung. But that would be the book to begin with, and to understand this deep practice of shamanic connection and relationship with the invisible world, from which they gathered their teaching and their healing power and their role as shamans, really, to the community in which they live. It's a short book, but it will be a real eye-opener for you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll check. I'll have a look at that. Just on that idea. So the suggestion is that it seems like the Western philosophical tradition has its origins in this kind of shamanic way of consciousness,
Yeah,
and then
that's what Kingsley is absolutely in despair about, because he said the West is finished because it's lost that tradition. He says it's come to the end of its life because it rejected that tradition. Because Plato turned it into something else. Instead of it being the deep communion with the other world, he turned it more into an intellectual theory or an intellectual path, really, which then got distorted later on into the rational path, the rational mind.
Mm-hmm.
So it went wrong with Plato, but before that, it was like with Pythagoras, the whole thing was a shamanic tradition, and it was connected with the shamans of Outer Mongolia and with Anatolia. The whole huge thing was a shamanic tradition, and the same with the Americas, North and South Americas. So we need to get back to that shamanic tradition. And as you read, you'll learn more about it, and then you can bring it into your teaching things and explain to them that this is what we've lost.
Mm-hmm.
We've lost the shamanic vision.
Yeah. And so I suppose this could be a nice kind of theme to close on, and it ties in with the alchemical idea. Is this idea of my understanding of the alchemical opus is that it starts in the body, in Saturn, and it's almost like a leaving of the body to the albedo of the realm of the soul, or the realm of the invisible, the realm of the images, like a sublimatio, and then it's a return to the body, and this is how I understand it. Perhaps it's not correct, but and then what image comes to mind is the image of the bodhisattva in Buddhism. And when you talk about the history of the Western philosophical tradition basically becoming disembodied, becoming just fascinated by the idea in itself or the analysis in itself, instead of, and losing touch with, as you're saying, the heart, with nature.
With nature, losing touch with the body and with the physicality of life and the importance of the physicality of it, so that it began to think about the transcendent, but nothing to do with the divinity of the immanent. It lost the shamanic understanding that everything was divine, including us.
Yeah.
That's the most important understanding. And this is what the alchemists realized and had to keep so secret, because of course it went against all the teaching of the church, the fact that we were carrying divinity within us and that we were part of the divinity of everything around us. This was the shamanic vision and also the alchemical vision, because the alchemists were really shamans.
And then I suppose in our individual lives and day to day, when we're, my understanding of the rubedo, or the living out or the dramatization of or the embodiment of these images, is my understanding of that is kind of, as we've discussed, the albedo is coming into a relationship, a feeling relationship with those images, and an understanding and a conversation and a receptivity. And then the rubedo, as I understand it, is more of a, how is this basically the moral dimension of that, the ethical dimension of that, of...
It's much more than that. It's revelation. That's what the rubedo is. It's the revelation of the oneness of everything.
I see.
You see? It's not moral, because the moral thing goes with that.
Right.
It's not separated out. It goes with the revelation that everything is unified, everything is one divinity, and we are part of it. And how can we serve it in the way that you are serving it?
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Yeah. So, yeah, I suppose I'm approaching it kind of in a kind of left brainy way, or a kind of divided way. I mean, yeah. So I mean, because from what I've got, from what you've just said, is this importance of keeping the shamanic flame alive, or keeping that tradition alive. And I think part of what we've discussed has been the contact, the albedo, the contact with the imagination, and that living world really that's alive within us. And then my kind of understanding of that is that because it's alive, is giving us messages, is giving us direction, is giving us synchronicities, and that mystically, who knows how, kind of informs our acts and gives formation to our words and gives formation to our acts and to the whole drama of life, and how we go, how we are in our relationships, how we are with others, all of that stuff.
Because if you're in the right relationship to the ground, then everything follows from that. If you're outside the ground, if you don't know that you're part of the ground, everything is confused. You don't know your path or where you're going. It's a question of alignment. And then the more you become aligned, the more expanding your understanding becomes, and the more your life is lived in a fulfilled way, and the more you feel fulfilled, and the more you feel that you're in touch with this mysterious entity called life, which is the whole of the cosmos as well. It's the discovery of your relationship to the cosmos, and the fact that it has an evolutionary purpose that then you become part of. You don't, so to speak, have your own, only on your own, your purpose. Your purpose is as part of this evolutionary growth or development or unfolding. The more it unfolds, the more we understand of ourselves, and the more it understands of itself. Because in this dimension, we are the medium of its understanding itself. See what I mean? And one of the most important things that we need to learn is that there is no death. And this is one of our biggest neuroses, is fear of death, and the fact that consciousness goes on beyond the death of the physical body. This has been known in all shamanic traditions, right from, thousands and thousands of years ago, but it's been completely forgotten. And so people live in fear of death and in misery when people die. And, that's a big, huge block, because it shows that we don't understand the flow of life. And this is where the earlier lunar understanding was that, like the moon, everything returns and regenerates continually. Nothing dies finally. So any other time you want to talk again, I'm quite happy, because I would enjoy talking to you.
I'd absolutely love that. I'd love to, a final thing on death. Is my feeling has been that the mystery of death has kind of opened up to me, or basically what you said in terms of this shamanic understanding. How can I explain it? So seeing images come up spontaneously from within, from the psyche, from wherever they come from, and seeing the correspondence of those images with other localities in time and space, the ancients, these synchronicities kind of dotted around this matrix we call like space and time, and you're like, aha, that there seems to be like a correspondence between this living image here and this. And my feeling is that is, I think that to me speaks to the mystery of death, the idea that, more than an idea, that the initiation or the realization or the seeing that there are spiritual dimensions, there are dimensions where non-material entities have intelligence which can affect us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that we go to those other dimensions when we die. We move on to other dimensions and go on learning, growing. We don't come to a full stop. There's a lovely, I'll send you another book which isn't out yet, but which you can get in January, which is called A Psychedelic Journey into the Mind of the Universe. And its subtitle is Diamonds from Heaven. And it's a record of this man in America who went over a 20-year journey, recording every single session and what he experienced.
Wow.
I did like that, because it would widen out your knowledge of what these other dimensions are. And also it widens you out to the benevolence of the universe, the love that is the ground of all of our consciousness. And this is something that we've lost as well, the awareness that we're held in the embrace, if you like, of the being of the universe with tremendous love. And that it wants to connect with us and be known as that, not as something judgmental or terrifying or whatever. So there's a lot to learn, and my memory isn't as good as it was, so I get held up by that. Can't remember everything, but I remember enough, for instance, to speak to you from my heart, so to speak, and to be able to communicate with you. It's very nice for me to have that, to have somebody who's interested and wants to listen, and also to share.
Absolutely.
But I'm sure there's a lot you could teach. I wouldn't worry about it. Just ask people what they want to know.
I'm going with it. I'm feeling seeing where it goes. And thank you so much. I'm lost for words really about how I feel. It's amazing to speak with you.
Well, we'll do it again. And now that we know how Zoom works, I haven't ever dared do one myself to begin with. I can click the thing when the people send it to me.
Yeah.
But you should have a recording, hopefully. But I don't know quite how you save the recording. But maybe it will tell you.
Yeah, I'll have a look into that. And my hope is to get it on YouTube, and I'll share that with you. And and we can speak again soon, hopefully.
Okay, lovely. Thanks very much then. I'll say goodbye.
Thanks, Anne. Bye.
Bye.